You're on the ride with the progress. The Hillside Express.
Hello and welcome to the Deep Sea Podcast, a punk take on a science podcast about everything deep sea. I'm Dr. Thomas Lindley, and joining me is the Professor Alan Jameson. Where are you, mate? Hello.
Hola. I'm in Barcelona.
Hola. He's naturalised.
Yeah. He's just one of the locals now. No, I'm in Barcelona, Spain, Mediterranean. Very nice. In fact, it's not. It's terrible. It's grey and miserable and raining. And
Can't talk about it just now, but we'll maybe circle back to that on a later episode, find out why you
were here with so many people.
Well, there's also Spanish going on here. Do you like that as a segue?
That's good, yeah.
I'm in South America. I'm in Ushuia, preparing for the second leg of my little Antarctic jaunt. So Kat Bolstad joined me out here for our squid shenanigans. We're talking about those a little bit later. We got the bus over from Punta Arenas. So Punta Arenas at the southern part of Chile. Got an interesting, supposedly 10-hour bus ride, but ended up being 16 hours. Little jaunt over to Ushuia in Argentina. Yeah, it was very windy. There's a ferry crossing involved with the bus, but it's just a barge. You don't even get off the bus. It's just this flat platform with two ramps that come down, and the bus drives on. And the weather was too bad, so we had to hang around there for ages. And then I would argue the weather wasn't quite good enough when we did get on it. So it's one of those ones where it just has this big door that opens on the front, and then it kind of grounds itself up the beach. and the vessel is like trying to hold position while we drive a coach onto it. It's good times.
Yeah.
It's good times.
Good fun. I've got fond memories of Ushuia.
Oh, yeah? What did you do down here?
I was working on a Spanish ship.
Oh, that was the military base, wasn't it?
No, it was just a downtown port. They wouldn't let me on the ship because I had a British passport. They don't like the British people down there. They still got.
I've noticed this.
They're quite vocal about it.
I'm definitely from New Zealand while I'm here.
Yes.
I did see something a bit strange. Like, there's obviously a lot of Falklands belongs to Argentina graffiti and posters and signs and streets named after it.
Yeah.
But there was a stamp in the tourist office. There was like a selection of them, Antarctica and penguins and things like that. And I'm watching all these tourists stamp it into their passports for fun, like just collecting all the stamps.
Oh.
And I'm just thinking, like, you should probably translate that. You're making quite a political statement by putting that in your passport. It might come back to haunt you.
Yeah, it's a nice little town, though. I once, one of our officers on that ship at the time, Spanish military guy, he was dancing in the Irish bar in Ushuaia and tripped and completely destroyed his ankle, and that was the end of his career. Yeah, that's my memory of Ushuaia.
That's a good time.
Like 2 hours to carry on back to the ship for these foot dangling behind him.
Was he a good dancer? Not anymore.
Not anymore, no.
Ended his dancing career as well.
Yeah, he should have stuck to driving boats, I think, rather than dancing.
Sounds like a good bar, though. Where's that one?
It's right in the middle of Ushuaia. I'm sure it's called the Dublin or the Dubliner or something like that. It's a little Irish bar. It's very good.
All right, I'll look out for that one.
Yeah.
We're killing a bit of time here while we're waiting to join the next vessel. I think it's coming in on the 24th or 5th. This one is going to be a bit of a flavour change because it is one of the tourist expedition vessels. They're going to let us deploy our gear a couple of times, and we're paying our way by giving lectures and generally being entertaining. And we also have an auction that we're allowed to do. So we've got some really interesting auction prizes that we're going to offer to raise a bit of science funds. So I'm totally selling out. I've not done it this way before, but it could be quite funny. Could be interesting.
What have you become?
I'm just a massive sellout, mate. Will science for money?
What are you selling them? What are you actually trying to part with here? What?
Knowledge and entertainment. Oh, the prizes.
Yeah.
Or
is that a secret?
Oh, well, we'll definitely go into it later. We've got some nice maps of Antarctica, which have been updated with some data.
Boring.
Got some nice books.
Boring.
Books and stickers.
Boring.
Books and stickers. Well, the star of the show is probably the life-size plush Colossal squid, which has its own suitcase because they're big.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely post some pictures of that. So someone maybe we'll be going home with that. It comes with the suitcase, so they just have to pay for the extra.
Go full telemarketing here. It comes with its own suitcase.
It comes with its own suitcase. Yeah. It was purple and found by the side of the road.
So it's also got fleas.
Well, fleas, bed bugs, an assortment of biting insects that are a biosecurity risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting. I'm not sure who can take it home. I'd kind of like it if it lived on the boat and just sort of lives as this huge throw pillow on one of the
How well contained
couches.
is it though? Like if they get stopped at the airport and say what's in the suitcase and they open it up, does it suddenly just like ping out into this massive giant squid?
Yes. And you're kind of greeted by a big eye when you open it. It looks like an eldritch horror.
Right.
And it's far too big for the container it's in. I'll get some pictures. It's a conversation starter. I was very glad that crossing the Argentine border, we weren't searched, because I've got a lot of unusual electronics and then this life-size plush colossal squid.
Fun.
It's been fun times. Just want to say a massive thank you to our patrons who continue to help make the show happen, and the patrons have been more crucial than ever actually as we transition to losing Georgia, and we've got some plans ahead for the podcast, so stay tuned for some updates on that. But it is the patrons that are keeping it going, so I just wanted to give a massive thank out to Luz, Caro McLaren, Tig, Austin Horncamp, Thora, and Lindsay and Harrison. And like I say, there's probably going to be a little bit of a transitional period while I get up to speed with the things from Georgia, and I'm doing it from Antarctica with only my work computer, so it's a little bit tricky. So things might be a little clunky for the next couple of episodes, but then we'll find our feet and we'll be back onto it again. But thanks for bearing with us.
News.
Some good deep sea stuff going on. The main thing that caught me, because I'm biased towards fish, is deep sea fish keep turning up. Probably the most famous one that went viral is the anglerfish in the genus Melanocetus. It is an anglerfish, sometimes called the black seadevil when you're being dramatic, and it was filmed coming into shallow sunlit waters and Tenerife by photographer David Jara Bogunya of Condrick Tenerife, which is an NGO devoted to shark and ray preservation. So the 5 to 6 inch long fish could fit in the palm of your hand despite everyone freaking out, and it died soon after that video, so it obviously wasn't well when it popped up. It was first posted on Instagram on the 5th of February and went really, really viral from there. Anglers wash up fairly regularly. We had a couple of famous ones last year, some of the larger species, but seeing one stranding actually as it happened under the surface was very rare. There's a few theories floating around over what's wrong with it. It's clearly sort of under a little bit of distress and not well. Sometimes they will eat something a little bit too big or something with a gas bladder that then causes them to float to the surface. It's how we get a lot of our specimens, actually. Things like the black swallower we first knew about because it ate something too large. It was decomposing in its stomach. It produced a load of gas and these things float up like a balloon, but she doesn't quite look like she's floating sort of due to something buoyant that she's eaten. So I'm not quite sure what was leading to that. I'll be interested to know what happened to it. Did anyone grab it? It's a really clean specimen, but
I don't know, it just says it died later, but it's obviously not right. People throw all these theories around and it's clearly not coming to the surface on purpose. I think it's the take home from that. And it's certainly not something that's going to come and bite you. And so it's
once you get the scale of it, it's kind of cute.
Yeah, but yes, I saw we had that. We've got a list of weird terminologies that the New York Times have been using to describe it, and it's just ridiculous. It really, truly is. I like the thing is that someone's in the press is saying it's got razor sharp teeth. I said, no, it doesn't.
They're quite fragile.
Yeah, it's just
its teeth are a cage. If anything, it's about stopping things escaping rather than
it can't bite anything bigger. It has to swallow something whole, right?
Yeah, it doesn't chew.
Yeah, it's just because of what it looks like and not what it actually is. So, I mean, to be fair, it's not the best looking fish in the sea, you know.
Yeah, we won't go that far.
But it lives in the dark, so it doesn't matter if it's ugly, right?
Beautiful pheromones and lights is how they sort of see each other.
It always smells amazing.
Oh, somebody should sniff it. Actually, no, most deep sea fish don't smell good. For biochemical reasons we've discussed.
Yeah, go and sniff a sea devil.
So the New York Times kind of towed the line with all the usual clickbaity words. So things like deep sea fish of nightmares, scary looking creature with devil in its name. It also randomly called them omnivores, which I think is maybe a stretch of that term. Maybe they just mean it's not particularly picky, but it's saying big mouths and sharp teeth and the desire to eat almost anything. So all a little bit dramatic. It's no friendly guppy or koi. It's black as the depths in which it normally lives. Teeth look like razors. Its lidless eyes staring forward, seeming to have remorseless cruelty. Its mouth perpetually open, frankly looks like it wants to swallow you and everything you hold dear. It's 5 inches long and dying.
Wow, they've really gone for that, haven't they?
They really have.
It wants to swallow you and everything you hold dear. Wow.
That's scientific fact. That's not editorializing. Yeah. That's true. Wow. Yeah, bit cringy. Mr. Frable is a senior collection manager for marine vertebrates at the Scripps Institute for Oceanography and manages to pull things back a little bit. So the article takes a little bit of a swerve near the end, quite rightly saying they live in a very different environment. They're going to look weird, but they're not gruesome or horrific. People don't see them as valuable to protect as panda bears. Thank you for trying to right that ship near the end. But all the clickbaity stuff is there at the beginning to suck people in.
Yeah.
Boo. There was a better one though.
Was there?
There was one by Dan Allback, of the Today website, which had a much better tone and actually went into the way people responded to it, which I found really interesting. So it had the sort of little fish as an ambassador for the deep sea, and it shared comments from people who were moved by the video. There's still human bias though. There's still lots of metaphors for like swimming into the light, and it wanted to see the sun, not the reality of it probably being completely blinded, cooked, and falling apart at the molecular level. But yeah, lots of people saw it as a symbol of hope and the possibility of opening up a new world, if only for a moment. So yeah, it's inspired poems and artwork. There's apparently lots of TikToks of people crying, some up to 10 million views. It's a nice callback to a Beetlejuice cartoon, which was inspired by the anglers washed up last year, which is now sort of super relevant as well, where one's washed up and there's a sunset and there's a thought bubble saying, "It's so beautiful, I might never have known." And we have that one printed out in our fish room at the museum. It's a sweet one, so we'll put that one in the show notes.
On the 5th of February, several researchers and a photographer on a shark research expedition near the Canary Islands discovered a black sea-devil anglerfish floating very near the surface when usually they will only be found between 200 and 2,000 metres. It was unwell when it was found and passed away shortly afterwards, and it went viral and inspired the internet, and also inspired me to write this poem, which is called "For the Anglerfish They Found in the Shallows." Did it scare you, little fish, that rush of warmth? With your life spent in the cool belly of the sea, was it strange? Was it heat burning, a sting to your fragile skin? How long did you float there, listless, as the comforting weight of home gave way to the thinning? Like mountain air to our fragile brains, did your head spin? Did your gills ache? It cannot have been anything but strange. But I hope, Melanocetus, that despite its unfamiliarity, your last hours were kind. I hope the warmth felt like a hearty meal, like energy stored for your next long life. I hope that in the sun, that impossibly bright lure above the waves, I hope you saw a friend.
And along those lines, there was actually a really nice orfish sighting. It was quite a small one. It washed up on a beach in Mexico, but it was surprisingly intact. Usually their tail breaks, but this one seems all there. Deserves the title King of the Mackerel. It's really beautiful. It's still got its red crest. Quite often the colours fade when they come up. They tried to get it back into the water a couple of times, but it was obviously just too disorientated and it was dying. They're often called the doomsday fish. It's got an association with earthquakes in Japanese folklore. But luckily somebody actually looked into that. So in a 2019 paper, they were found there wasn't really a correlation between earthquakes and when these fish turn up. But they're both quite striking events, and the human brain likes to group things together.
Was it definitely an orfish? Don't orfish not quite often get mixed up with something else?
Dealfish, that was the one, the last sort of big one. It was filmed alive with some divers. That was a dealfish, although it tricked me at first. It's got quite a fisheye lens and it sort of distorts it, but I'm pretty sure this one was an orfish. But the dealfish have like a deeper head.
Doomsday fish.
Doomsday fish.
Evil things.
Black sea devil wants to swallow
Black
you.
sea devils, doomsday fish, and then the next one, giant isopod named after the Dark Lord Darth Vader. Well, this one's a giant isopod of the genus Bathy-normouse, and this one's been called Bathy-normouse Vaderi because it shares a similar shape with the Star Wars character's iconic helmet. So yeah, these are big isopods. You can get over a foot long. Isopods are the pill bugs. The kind of, we call them woodlouse, if you like. And this is one from Vietnam, and apparently now becoming a popular dish. Although I looked into this thing, we talked about this months and months and months ago, but somebody was talking about giant isopods as being part of a fishery. And it turned out, if you really look into it, it wasn't that they were going out to catch giant isopods. It's just if they were caught as bycatch, they were a bit of a novelty. The press kind of turned it around to say these are now part of a fishery.
Well, we reported that one about a year ago, I think it was, and it was a ramen, wasn't it? And it looked really, really unappealing. But in the interesting way that humans are, that media coverage means that actually now it is becoming a fishery. Like it was bycatch, but now there's more and more of a demand due to the novelty. The local fishers are actually shifting towards them. So it's gone from bycatch to bycatch, but we'll keep them, to actually being targeted a little bit more now. So people are getting a bit worried about that because they're very long-lived.
They can't be nice to eat, though.
Oh, no.
I mean, they're isopods, right? They're just going to be like eating a foot-long cockroach. All right.
And they don't have that sort of tail tail flip defense. Because in a lobster
Yeah.
or a shrimp or prawn things, it's the tail
Yeah.
and it's that flexor muscle that's their escape response, but they don't have that. There might be something around the swimmers, but I don't think I'd like to eat them. I think they're mostly hollow.
It's just crunching through exoskeleton, but maybe that's the thing. All right.
Bit of novelty.
Darth Vader's helmet lives.
It does look the part, actually. It's quite a nice picture.
So it does look like Vader's helmet.
Yeah, a little bit if you squint. My dad joke,
Yeah.
Bathy-normouse, more like Bathy-normouse.
That's terrible, but it's strangely good. Yeah. As a father myself, I approve.
Anyway, there's been a radioactive blip.
I think I've had a few, to be honest, but nothing that relates to the deep sea.
It's been a tough year.
Yeah.
The deep sea bed, especially in areas where it's very old deep sea bed, contains a nice history of Earth, and the several thin layers of ocean crusts that scientists from Germany have identified has a sudden surge of isotope beryllium-10.
Oh, yeah.
Sometime between 9 and 12 million years ago. Here comes the beryllium.
Beryllium-10. It's the classic beryllium-10.
I'm stuck on beryllium-9 and they've stopped updating it.
Really?
So I'm worried I'll get a virus.
Yeah. Well, I used to take beryllium-10 for toe fungus, and it never worked, so...
No, it's for the toe fungus. It makes the fungus stronger. Have we ever talked about Footfest on the podcast? And do we want to? You unlocked a memory.
I'm not sure we have. We can do the short version in case we've mentioned this before, but this is on a German ship off Chile 2018, I think. Tom and I were bored and playing some games, and one game was to get an agar plate from a proper scientist, draw a line down the middle, put a T on one side, an A on the other side, and then take a swab of your most powerful toe to get some good bacteria. I actually wore a sock for 48 hours without taking it off to try and get a good brew on the go.
You did training.
Yeah, did a lot of prep for this, and then we swabbed our toes, and then you wipe it on either side of the agar plate, either side of the line, and the rules were the first person's bacteria to cross the line wins. I won that particular battle.
Yours were quick. Yours got right over
and
the
then
line.
we did the right thing. Rather than throw it out, we threw it in a container and sent it from Ecuador back to England. And by the time it got back, we unpacked the gear, found the agar plate, which had absolutely erupted in some sort of bacteria, looking like it came from Tom's side, possibly Athley's foot. And it was absolutely horrendous.
So this beryllium-10,
Oh, beryllium-10.
This beryllium-10 is a radioactive isotope that's continually produced by cosmic rays interacting with Earth's atmosphere, and it rains down into the atmosphere and settles in the ocean where it gets incorporated into the crusts that form there over a lot of time. We don't know if this blip is present globally in the Pacific or just this particular location, and that's going to help them tease apart what's going on here. But the theories are that maybe 9 million years ago there was a big shift in ocean currents that might have deposited more beryllium-10 in this particular location, or if it was worldwide, then it may be indication of a near-Earth supernova, or our solar system sort of passed through a cloud as the result of something like that, and we got a lot more cosmic rays for a while. So it's still early days. This is still just a data point, and then we'll try and figure out what comes of it. But if anything comes of this, we'll try and do an update. But the deep sea as a repository for Earth's history.
Classic beryllium-10, cosmic rays. Why isn't there a group of rays called cosmic rays? That would be really cool.
Oh.
A whole new group of rays and just call them cosmic rays.
Oh, that's a really good name. We'll try and find the excuse for that. It needs to be like a whole family. It needs to be a group.
Or roller skates and cosmic rays.
All right, I'm on it.
Get that in your museum, Tom.
We'll figure it out. There's more deep sea space stuff going on, something we're familiar with. KM3NET, the cubic kilometer neutrino telescope in the
That
Mediterranean.
was my postdoc back in the day. Shall we explain what neutrino telescopes are?
Go for it.
Right, so I got a job in a European project called KM3NET. It stands for Kilometre Cube Network. And the idea was to put down 10,000 photomultipliers, which are very sensitive sensors that can detect bursts of light on a nanosecond scale. The idea is that every cataclysmic event in space, including the galactic centre and the Earth's core, but mostly big events that happen, supernovas and whatnot, they give out neutrinos, which are subatomic particles. And to detect a neutrino is very difficult because you can't see it. So it has to pass through a medium. And when it goes through a medium, it gives off muons. And muons give off Cherenkov radiation. Cherenkov radiation is a small nanosecond burst of blue light, which is about 480 nanometers. And so when you install these things, they put one off France for about a test line, and they switched it on. And the idea is you'd sit there in the dark of the deep sea, because you're using the seawater as the medium for which the neutrinos need to pass through. They would be sitting there waiting for this little burst of light. And then if you've got an array, which is why it has to be a kilometre cubed or even bigger, you can try and work out the trajectory of where it came from. And ultimately, they're going down the route of if it bends, there's maybe dark matter or something like that. Anyway, switched it on, and of course, all that water's full of animals which are moving and they're colliding with the photomultipliers. When a lot of gelatinous animals collide with a static object in water, they give off bioluminescence, and bioluminescence happens to be in the vicinity of 480 nanometers. So then you've got this super sensitive physics experiment sitting in the deep sea, waiting for a nanosecond burst of blue light, and it can't see anything at all because there's a jellyfish wrapped around it going, blue lights.
Giving off a million times more.
So I spent about 2 or 3 years of my life going around the Mediterranean trying to find somewhere that was dead. And so we worked off Marseille, worked off Spain, worked off Italy, all around the Mediterranean, all the way along over to Greece, and found that the only place we could get access that had no light at all was between 3,000 and 5,200 metres off Greece, in the vicinity of Calypso Deep, is biologically dead. There's just nothing going on there. So at the end of the postdoc, we wrote this report saying, if you want a dark place, I mean, I'm literally going around for 3 years looking for nothing. Couldn't find it, kept finding stuff.
The best dark is over there.
Yeah. In search of absolutely nothing at all. Finally found it. But it was fascinating. It was really cool to spend 3 years with a bunch of astrophysicists. Worked on a lot of different ships as well. It was really cool.
Well, it's working.
Is it?
Yeah, it spotted a neutrino 20 times more powerful than previously detected. Don't just say it's a jellyfish.
Yeah, cool, bud.
It was actually detected back in February 2023, but it produces such huge amounts of data, it's taken a long time to process it and confirm it. Bit of space in the deep sea. Two stories on that.
Beryllium-10 and neutrinos.
Guess what we're doing now?
What?
We're having a birthday party.
Birthday party for who?
Happy birthday, Colossal Squid!
The Colossal Squid. It's a birthday special.
Oh, wow. How old is it?
It has been 100 years since it was first described. We've known about the colossal squid for 100 years, but it remains mysterious. So as part of its birthday surprise, we'll talk about what we do know and what we don't know about the colossal squid with our resident, very resident actually, because we're sharing an Airbnb, squid expert Kat Bolstad. And we'll explain just why we're hopping on a tourist expedition and poking around in Antarctica. Coming to you from an Airbnb above a ski rental shop next to a construction site in Ushuia, Argentina, gateway to Antarctica. I am joined by Associate Professor Kat Bolstad, lab leader of the Auckland University of Technology, lab for cephalopod ecology and systematics, but we know them as the Squid Squad. Hello, Kat.
Hi, Tom. Here we are, the end of the world, about to head off on a tourist vessel to Antarctica to do some science alongside some tourism activities.
Yeah, we somehow blagged our way onto this one. I've not done things this way before, but...
No, I mean, we've heard that it can be a good option. We had reliable intel that this was a good platform for both science communication and achieving some science on a vessel that was going there anyway. And so we thought we'd have a crack at it.
What could possibly go wrong? But we're gathered today to celebrate a very important birthday.
It is an important birthday.
Happy 100th birthday to one of our favorites.
Yep, one of our very favorite animals, the colossal squid, described 100 years ago this year. Where to begin?
So why don't we start with the description? When was it first described? What was the specimen like? Where did it come from?
The specimen was a pair of specimens. So 2 arm crowns were recovered from the stomach of a commercially harvested sperm whale in, I think, 1924. So it took them a little while to reach the person who would do the describing. But the person, last name Hamilton, gives rise to the species name hamiltoni, was working based out of the Las Malvinas, the Falkland Islands, of local fame here in Ushuaia. And he recognized pretty much straight away that these large arm crowns didn't belong to anything that he had ever seen before. So they had some features that he felt made them different from other large bits of squid he had seen from whale stomachs, and I guess he had seen enough to know when something was unusual. So he preserved them. There's not a lot of information about exactly where they came from other than around the South Shetland Islands. And they got preserved and sent off to Guy Robson at the Natural History Museum in London. And he confirmed that they were in fact something different. They had what remains a unique feature among known squids, which is that the arms start out with fairly normal pairs of suckers with teeth in them, and those give way to pairs of fairly large stationary hooks, which then again give way to pairs of suckers toward the end of the arm. So all 8 arms have suckers and then hooks and then suckers toward the ends, and no other squid that we know of has that arrangement. And that's separate from the famous swiveling hooks that are on the ends of the 2 long tentacles as well. So it is a well bestowed with sharp armature animal. And that unique combination was what made both of those people pretty sure that it was something new and different.
Was it immediately like far, far larger than anything else? Was it immediately a stir, or was it just a new big squid and they didn't realize?
It was a new big squid. They weren't really sure what it was going to fit into, and they certainly at the time did not think it belonged in the family that we ended up figuring out that it belongs in, because it's related to the glass squids, which otherwise look like small light bulbs drifting around in the deep sea there.
It's like the supergiant amphipod. It's like a total outlier.
Yeah. So the other ones are like super transparent. They have reduced all of their internal anatomy to basically a single shiny spindle-shaped visceral mass in the middle, and then the big dark shiny eyes, which have light organs underneath them for counter-illumination. And then the colossal squid is easily twice as long as the next largest one and much, much heavier. So at first glance, it doesn't seem like it belongs with the rest of them, but it does.
Something I had difficulty with at the start, and something that a lot of people struggle with as we're chatting about these things, is teasing apart the giant squid and the colossal squid. They're both giant and colossal, but those are our names.
Yes.
So how do we tease them apart, and that argument over biggest and what counts as biggest?
Sure. Yep. So, and you had asked actually if this was immediately bigger than anything else. The giant squid actually was starting to be reasonably well known at the time. It was clear that this was not the same species as the giant squid, and the proportions are quite different. But one of the things that helps to separate them to sort of the layperson is that giant squid are found in all of the tropical and temperate world oceans, but not at the poles. And the colossal squid only lives in Antarctica. So immediately, depending where you are in the world, if you come across a very, very large squid on a beach, you could make a fair guess whether you knew about its features or not as to who it was. But they're actually in different families. So the giant squid, which is Architeuthis dux, is the only one in its family and has some distant relatives in other families, but it's really its own thing. And the colossal squid belongs to the glass squid family, the Cranchiidae, and we think there may be 60 species in that family, although dozens of them are probably undescribed. That's a family where, we have genera where maybe 1 or 2 things are reasonably well known, but people think there are probably at least a dozen. So there's a lot of work to do within that group. We had a paper come out a couple months ago describing some new glass squids from the Pacific. That was the Theonius paper, and those ones are the most closely related to the colossal, and that's in fact where we make some of our inferences about what the colossal might look like, because we haven't seen it alive in its natural habitat yet. So some of what we're guessing we might see comes from live observations of Theonius, this close cousin. And then in terms of features, so the colossal squid, as we discussed, has got all these different types of hooks in different locations. The giant squid doesn't have a lot of terribly interesting morphological features other than being really big.
And it got its own family despite nothing structurally striking.
Yeah. It's a very big, very long, very skinny squid with very small fins, really, really long arms and tentacles. So a giant squid can grow to probably 13 meters, we think, for a large female. Males get to about 10 meters, and probably at least 2/3 of that would be just the long tentacles. And then, of course, there are reports of them getting much longer than that, but if you have a specimen on a beach and you pick up the tentacles and you walk down the beach with it to stretch them out, depending how old it is, you can stretch them quite a long way.
I know that's a quote from Kerry, our malacologist, is always, how big is a giant squid? It's how big would you like it?
Yes.
You can just stretch them as far as you'd like.
Basically, yes. And I would say that the colossal is not quite that elastic. So colossal squid also very large, but in a different way. So we think they probably top out around 6 or 7 meters, but much heavier. So much
They've got
more,
a real big body that
Yeah.
the arms are much shorter.
yeah, much more robust. So, if we're talking about who's the biggest land mammal in Africa, is it the giraffe or the elephant, right? Is it who's tallest or who's heaviest? Similarly here, the colossal squid, very robust, quite a lot shorter, but much stockier and much heavier. And I mentioned the very small fins of the giant squid, right? So the colossal squid has enormous, very thickly muscled fins. And that's one of the things that makes people wonder a bit about its lifestyle and what it's capable of. And is it an ambush predator? Is it very active? People have suggested it has a very low metabolism and doesn't need to eat a lot, but it seems like it's certainly capable of at least bursts of speed, which I guess makes sense if you think about who the predators are.
I only know from joining you on Squid Christmases and things, but they've got distinctly different smells. You can ID a giant squid by its smell.
Oh, yeah, you can. Yes, that's true. When they're fresh, they're both quite pleasant, but if
Aren't we all?
It's a fair call. But if you've been working on giant squid that's been defrosting for a while and you've been in there all day, you probably don't notice, but people will physically recoil from you when you leave the lab, especially if you do something silly like get into an elevator. Maybe other people will leave the elevator. That's happened before. So the giant squid has ammonium ions in its tissues that presumably assist with buoyancy, maintaining neutral buoyancy without expending a lot of swimming effort. And that causes it to be apparently not palatable to a lot of things, including humans, which is lucky for the giant squid. But it does mean that it's quite strong smelling within a few hours of being fully defrosted, yeah. And for the colossal squid, that's not true. So the glass squid family have a different buoyancy mechanism. They have a coelom inside the mantle that is filled with ammonium chloride, and that kind of acts as a slightly positively buoyant fluid-filled bladder instead of having those ions distributed throughout the tissues.
Got kind of a swim bladder. I'm guessing that would still smell, but it's at least all in one place.
Yes, yes. And we haven't really examined enough colossal squid post-defrosting, to notice so much of what the smell is like. That probably is ruptured fairly quickly during capture, and there may not be that much of that left over anyway.
So you hinted about piecing together missing information. These are very, very elusive. We've got video of them sort of dead and dying at the surface, caught in long lines, but...
Yeah, so humans have encountered them most frequently either as prey items in other animals we've been examining, so in the stomach contents of sperm whales, but also smaller individuals from seabirds, from sea lions, penguins, albatrosses, and petrels. And that makes sense because those animals have been evolving for millions of years to predate these, right? So they're very good at catching them, and we're not very good at catching them. So it makes sense to use those as biological samplers when we have the opportunity. Humans most recently have encountered them as a predator on toothfish longlines, and it's not known how much of the natural diet toothfish forms for the colossal squid, but they do seem happy to opportunistically have a snack on a hooked toothfish. So one of the other big differences about living in the Antarctic versus where the giant squid lives in the rest of the world is I fairly confidently say you will never see a healthy adult giant squid at the surface because it's too warm for them. They live down in the depths where it's 2 to 4 degrees. They don't come up through that surface layer at all. In Antarctica, of course, that's not the case. So it doesn't seem to be problematic for a colossal squid to go right up and down the water column, follow a hooked toothfish to the surface if it's having a good meal. There's no temperature boundary that makes that impossible for them. So they have been known to follow hooked toothfish up to the surface, and that's where they get encountered by fishing vessels. And sometimes they get removed from the line if possible and released back into the ocean, and sometimes it's clear that they have become entangled and are too damaged to survive that encounter, and that's where every once in a while we get a nice specimen brought back to us for science, and that's where your colossal squid at Te Papa came from.
The famous Colossal, the only complete specimen on display.
Correct.
Still the most popular thing in the museum after decades.
How could it not be? I mean, what else do you want to look at, really?
It's pretty striking. If you visit Te Papa, well, for one, you can't miss it, but definitely come say hi.
Yeah. Give her a little pat.
Yeah. They're such a nuisance to some of the toothfish longliners that they've actually changed where some people are fishing to avoid these squid nibbles.
There have been a few papers that have specifically looked at the incidence of colossal squid evidence of predation on toothfish, as well as colossal squid occurring in the stomachs of toothfish. So these two species seem to predate on each other at different life
Depending who's
stages.
biggest.
Depending who's biggest. Or not. I mean, it's ridiculous, but the biggest colossal squid beak that we know of came out of the stomach of a toothfish. So there has to be some scavenging going on there.
I don't think it took out the whole thing.
I don't think so. And I don't think it swam up and just, excised
Just
the buccal
plucked out a
bulbs.
beak.
Like, oh, you took down my dad. Here, I'll show you. So, so there are maps that sort of show the fishing effort that's been put in and the number of lines that have evidence of colossal squid attacks, and then the number of fish on the lines as well. So people have dug into the statistics of this, and there seem to be certain areas around Antarctica where more of the lines are attacked more frequently by colossal squids, but it's never super high. But apparently it's enough to be enough of a nuisance that people have changed some of their locations, yeah.
And from sperm whale diets, there's an indication that there is a large population.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any idea what the natural population of them is, but they seem to make up the vast majority of the sperm whale diet in Antarctica by weight. And it's been quite a while since we were regularly checking sperm whale stomachs, but at least in the commercial whaling area, there were estimates that up to 90% of the diet by weight was colossal squid down here. And there were reports of, specific dates or times where the sperm whales that were being harvested at that time, you'd open up the stomachs and they were just packed with colossal squid like sardines, like full to distension with just large individuals of colossal squid. So when they find a good patch of them, they certainly seem to go for it.
Wow. So we have a huge animal that appears very abundant and is not depth restricted.
But we can't find it.
We know nothing about it, but we can't find it. We can't see them.
And I kind of love that. I mean, they're doing a really good job of avoiding us.
Yeah, a really good job. And something that's led me and you to ponderings is, when we go and try and find them, do we look too much like something they're trying to avoid?
Yeah, so this is a classic issue with trying to observe deep sea stuff, right? If we want to see stuff, we need to have gear that can see the stuff and lights that let our gear see the stuff. And if what we're trying to observe has any sense at all of light or disturbance in its habitat, it sees us coming a mile away, right? So anything that's aware of a potential large light-producing threat in its environment is going to be long gone by the time we get there. And this is a known issue with things like ROVs and human-occupied vehicles, and the behaviors that we do see in the animals that are observed. How natural are those behaviors? Because they're aware that we're there. Is it just a threat response? Do we see the ones that don't have the sense to flee, or their startle response is to just freeze? And so I think there's been quite a lot less effort still in Antarctica looking around, right? Where it's not like places like the Monterey Canyon, for example, where people have been observing regularly for decades. But I would say, given that the sperm whale is such a major predator of the colossal squid, it's going to be very wary of anything large coming down the water column, creating a disruption, probably triggering some bioluminescence. So if we put down a camera system that's fairly large with bright lights, they're going to get out of Dodge.
Because the eyes are huge and really sensitive, it seems.
Yeah, so both these large squid species, giant and colossal, have very, very large eyes, the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. And it's pretty clear they must have fairly good visual acuity, and they wouldn't be maintaining the energy expense of having those large eyes if they weren't valuable to them. And so some scientists who examined the colossal squid specimen in 2008 wrote a paper hypothesizing just why the eyes might be so large and what that's doing for them. We can put a link to that in the...
Oh, yes, yep, we'll include a link.
They calculated that they think the colossal squid's vision would probably let it perceive a fairly strong light signal just up to about 100 meters away, which is also probably the exact range where a sperm whale might pick it up on sonar. The colossal squid's best shot at avoiding predation is to not be detected by the whale in the first place, because once the whale has noticed it's there, then it becomes a matter of chase and avoidance or fight it off, which is unlikely to be successful. So if they can perceive the whale before the whale perceives them, that's their best chance at evasive maneuvers. So that is most likely what those large eyes are doing, and makes it extra difficult to have any kind of light in the water column when you're looking for a colossal squid.
Some interesting, very separate umvolts, because the whales are hunting acoustically, using their echolocation,
That's
and
right.
the squid are avoiding optically, looking out for bioluminescence being disturbed by the whale. So it's weird that their senses don't overlap, that they're both trying to outmaneuver the other.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about what kind of signal a colossal squid might give on echolocation, because it's not a very dense animal, right? It should be about the same density as the surrounding seawater. So what exactly is producing the signal or the read? There's only a few hard parts in the body. Does the whale read like the eye lenses and the beak, and that's sort of enough for it to get a fix on it, or is there some kind of read from the musculature as well? We don't really know.
So despite being huge, colossal even, yeah, they're probably quite difficult for the whales to see.
They probably are. And there was another very cool paper recently about how the development of acoustic hunting in toothed whales might have influenced squid behavior and evolution, and some hypotheses about ways that squids might have updated their behavior or certain behaviors been selected for because they would reduce their ability to be perceived then by diving sperm whales. So perhaps instead of orienting the body horizontally like a lot of fast swimming squids, a lot of deep sea squids tend to be more on an angle or more vertical, and that probably gives a smaller silhouette to a sperm whale that's diving straight down from the surface. There might be pressure to minimize how long mating encounters last, because then you've got two individuals maybe giving a read instead of one, which is a larger acoustic target. And yeah, a couple of other hypotheses about things that squid might now do that would be different from before they had echolocating predators.
It's starting to feel like The Quiet Place. Like lots of weird little behavioral techniques.
So now we also know we can't make noise, right? No light and nothing that might simulate, the sound signal of a hunting sperm whale.
So this is a technical challenge, which is where we started putting our heads together a little bit. We have shy animals, so we need a silent, low-profile sampling device. We have a 3D void, because it's the pelagic, so there isn't an up, down, left or right. There isn't a front or back. Animals could approach from any angle. Then we need, hopefully, something to attract, something to bring it in.
And we still need to be able to see ourselves, whatever's coming in. So we can't see in the dark, and the camera can't see in the dark. So we have to figure out a way that we can see what's going on, but that the squid can't see what's going on.
Because we know it really doesn't like light.
Yes. Yes.
It considers that a bad sign.
Some kinds of light.
Well, that's just it. There's an intriguing structure on the eye.
Yeah. So all of the glass squids have light organs of some kind. Some of them have some extras, but what they all share is most of the body is transparent. They have this small spindle-shaped visceral mass inside the mantle, and then they have these enormous opaque eyes. It doesn't seem to have been possible to make those eyes transparent across the course of evolution. I can't think of any animals that have managed that, actually.
It's sort of the function of an eye absorbing light kind of means you've got to disrupt it.
Yeah, the best alternative seems to be to mask the silhouette of those opaque structures, at least from underneath. So they've got counter-illumination specifically on their eyeballs. They've got a range of light organs across different species in the family that are blocking out or disrupting that silhouette from below. And so, like some others, the colossal squid has got sort of strip-shaped photophores on the ventral side of the eyeball. We don't actually know exactly what those will look like in life, but some of its close relatives have been observed, and we can make some guesses based on that.
And that may be for intraspecific communication. They may signal to each other.
Yeah, once you've got them, you might as well use them for as many things as possible, right? So if you are a large, visually attuned animal in the dark deep sea and you have a unique light signal that lets you recognize somebody else in your species, that's probably valuable. And if your major predator is a sperm whale that's hunting acoustically from above, then it seems like the primary function of the light organs under your eyeball might not be to avoid that predator anymore. So you're maintaining them for some reason, they're valuable to you for some reason, and that doesn't seem to be avoiding your major predator.
The little glass squids used it to remove their silhouette, but once you get too big for everything except this one big awkward predator, which luckily isn't visual.
Yeah, and comes from the opposite direction, they must be doing something else with them, right? And so communication is a good bet. They could be using them, of course, to illuminate their surroundings and to help them see their own prey. That's certainly possible as well. But we know that plenty of squid also communicate with each other using bioluminescence. So that also seems quite plausible.
So we put all these bits and pieces together.
So many bits and pieces.
I'd wanted to make a light lure for a while, just to branch out a little bit from our baited systems that me and Alan had used in the past, just to try and see some different critters and different behavior. But I hadn't really got an application. I'd, of course, been inspired by Edie Widder and her work with the E-jelly, but also her work with different optical properties and different wavelengths and observing things while being unseen. So then over a Squid Christmas chat in Wellington.
It was your first Squid Christmas.
Oh, there we go. That's probably
You
why I was
fool.
all giddy. Yeah, I thought I could do things I couldn't possibly manage.
And here we are.
So we started putting together a lure. It went through a few different manifestations. I can't believe how different it is from how it started.
We have pages and pages of early sketches that look nothing like what we ended up with, but were very useful to think through along the way, and some of them are sort of put aside for maybe later.
Yeah.
Maybe next time.
Maybe version 2.
No, but we had an opportunity, had started to think about this as a more general idea. Then the opportunity came up to think about developing it for a specific species application, right? Because if we wanted to emulate the light signal of a specific squid to try to attract it, and it has to be a fairly large squid, right? We can't really emulate the twinkling displays of some of the smaller ones, at least yet. Well, the giant squid doesn't have light organs. Right, so that's not a possibility. Then the opportunity came up to think about what other large squids would have a light signal. We had to go with Teningia.
We did.
On the bounty voyage
Could
about
be
a year
argued
ago.
a successful go.
Could be argued. I mean, a Teningia came and looked at our extremely low-tech replica of the Teningia light display. Could have been a coincidence, but that system has also never seen a Teningia otherwise, despite about 1,500 other deployments. Could be a
What are the
coincidence,
odds?
would be a big coincidence. Yeah, and then you were coming to Antarctica already on a voyage, and so we thought about light signal, large squid, Antarctica, and there really could be only one. So here we are, go big or go home. Develop our system specifically to see if it would be interesting to colossal squid.
We're grateful to Pure Ocean, who funded the project, and that let us then develop the system. We pinned down the light lure bit as the attractant. We had made a frame that was nice and quiet, so it wouldn't jingle, didn't have any shackles and things on it that might create some sound in the water column. Even the frame's profile itself resembled the colossals.
So one of the characteristics of the glass squids in the few species that have been observed alive is that they often hold their arms and tentacles in a bundle up above the head. Their large eyes have an impressive capability actually to either look out to the sides like a classic prey animal or to scrunch forward so they have binocular vision when they want to target a prey item or, really get a better look at something. So holding those arms in a bundle directly overhead in what we call the cockatoo pose seems to be a common behavior to at least the smaller species. We also were debating whether just a disembodied eyeball might be a little bit creepy.
If their vision is that good.
So not practical to replicate the entire colossal squid silhouette, but thinking about, if you were to see one from an angle and it was holding the arms up in a bundle in the cockatoo pose, what would that look like? Could we create something that looked like the eyeball maybe at the bottom of a bundle of arms? And we spoke with some very clever engineers at my home university, at Auckland University of Technology.
They made our scribblings real.
Yeah,
Told us when it wouldn't work.
Yes. Yeah, we had a few ideas that we passed by them, but what we ended up with was I feel pretty good about it. It's a system that fits in a suitcase, weighs 20 kilos or less. We've recently discovered we can reconfigure it not just to be this oval-shaped camera system, but actually to function as a small frame to deploy itself or a copy of itself.
So the spare one we carry with us becomes the deployment mechanism for them. So yeah, we're traveling light here. I'm looking at 6 suitcases in front of us. It doesn't feel like we're traveling light, but the whole idea was the system fits in a suitcase. We can send it off with students. We can send it off with people. You can get there by plane because I'm over logistics and sending equipment.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story.
Yeah. The main objective is to get the system in the water, and you were able to do that for us for the first time on the Schmidt voyage you were just on. So it's had some deployments in Antarctica already, and now we're sort of taking it out for its second run, testing just how flexible it might be. But we did a dry run of that as well, sort of.
I'll post a link. We had a couple of adventurous days in Kelly Tarleton's Sea Life Centre in Auckland, going there before sunrise, before it opened, and they let us play in their tanks because they were lovely. They're amazing.
So if we fast forward a bit from the months where we had random scribblings on paper and mocked up in PowerPoint and other formats where we were trying to get the engineers to understand what we wanted to do, we gave ourselves a deadline of trying to be ready to do some testing by mid last year. Yeah, so I used to work at the local aquarium at Kelly Tarleton's in Tamaki Makaurau in Auckland, New Zealand. And in thinking about where we could assemble the system for the first time and put it in the water and just see if it did what we wanted it to do, we realized that a nice controlled environment would be in the large fish tanks at the local aquarium. And so they very kindly gave us access to those outside of public visiting hours. And that turned out to be at about 5 o'clock in the morning. So we did. We had a couple of very early days, but really happy with how that testing went, right? We were able to see how far our 360 camera could see with the red lights that we were using. Just get a sense of whether what we had started to put together seemed to be on the right track of what we wanted to achieve.
And then to work in this completely open 3D space, we took a gamble and we went for a 360 camera in a pressure housing, which was made by, again, a local company, by Mantis Subhousing.
Yeah, we had some connections with a local dive company and their side branch engineering arm, which is Mantis Sub. One of the other known or strongly hypothesized issues with trying to film deep sea animals is if you're looking in one direction, what about all the other directions? I would love to put down an ROV with a downward looking camera above it and just see who's around that's never seen.
Just out of field of view.
By the, who's following the ROV the entire time and laughing into their tentacles at the fact that, they're watching us for hours and we have no idea that they're there.
Yeah, who's getting out the way long before the ROV lights fall on them.
Exactly, right? So we could have the best light lure and system in the world and we could be looking over there and there's a colossal squid behind us watching what we're doing and, just having the time of its life well out of shot. But yeah, the testing showed that if a large animal came through the frame within the distance we were expecting, we would see it and there would be no hiding behind the camera.
We were enthused, we were optimistic following those first tests. We did have another field test where we thought we'd deploy it in the wild. Out to Kaikoura Canyon. Lovely Andrew of Coffee with Andrew fame has a little batch, which is what people in New Zealand call like a little summer home /
holiday house.
Yeah.
Often on the coast.
So he put us up next to the Kaikoura Canyon, which is a deep canyon off the southern island of New Zealand where sperm whales turn up quite a lot. And we've got a lot of thank yous, actually. A lot of people have helped us on this project.
Yes, they have. Yeah, we've been very lucky. We've had very good friends along the way who have helped us get through some of the milestones that we wouldn't have managed otherwise. So we had a connection with a sperm whale research group operating out of Otago, led by Will Raymond and Marta Guerra, and then PhD student Will Karame has a field season multiple times a year where they go and observe the sperm whale behavior feeding in those canyons. And that's a known sperm whale feeding spot. We know that there are squid around there as well. Giant squid have washed up on the beaches around Kaikoura. And so we thought if we wanted to get it out over some deep water fairly close to shore and in an area where we know that at least squid predators are hanging around, even if they're not eating colossal squid because colossals are only in Antarctica, this seemed like maybe a good opportunity. Did a couple days with them out on their boat while they were observing whale diving and surface behaviors. They gave us the opportunity to put our system in the water a couple times a day and just work through the logistics of building it in the fields, deploying it.
Is this going to work? How many people does it require? Hand-hauling.
From 250 meters.
Yeah, it's a good workout.
Several times per trip. And it was a bit bouncy.
I threw my guts up. I was a mess. I can't do small boats.
I didn't know that in advance, so I didn't mean to put you in that situation, but you powered through it admirably, I have to say. I think they were very impressed with you. Like, you were hyper efficient. Like, no, just give me a second. Okay, let's go.
Yeah, spew over the side and then straight back onto the line.
Yep. Yeah, and you were only a little bit of a hollow shell of a man by the end.
It's pretty fragile by the end of it. When we got the opportunity to deploy, I was digging deep.
Yeah, and we did see some things. We saw what we think was probably a pretty big ling came by the camera.
Yeah.
We didn't have any squid sightings on that one, but again, it showed us that the lights we were using were working. It showed that the cameras were recording and would be able to see things within the field of vision that we wanted. It gave us some very useful insight into deploying off small vessels if we would need to do that again in the future, which I feel is going to serve us well in a couple days here.
Realistic expectations, although you've started talking about 500 meters and I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Just want to be ready in case the opportunity arises.
And then finally, we got to use it in anger. So on, the last Schmidt Ocean Institute cruise, the Antarctic Climate Connections, I was lucky enough to go on that one for 5 weeks. That's why I've been out here originally. They were kind enough to let me sort of deploy in the night in between ROV ops when people needed a bit of a turnover and a bit of a break. So
but you didn't need a break, though.
No, I just steamed on. But luckily it was light 24 hours a day, so I didn't know I was deploying at 3 a.m. And we were lucky enough to get it in multiple times. We actually had two systems. We had a deep one and a shallow one, so there were two systems we were getting in. We didn't find the star of the show on this leg because you'd know if we did, because we'd be wearing crowns and capes and just be super famous. But it did attract some really cool wildlife. We did have some squid really collide with it. Like I don't know if that was deliberate, but it certainly got some glacial squid, was it?
Yeah. We got
coming along.
some very close squid encounters. The squid camera did see squid.
Yes, exactly. Squid seemed to like it. And then we realized that our deeper camera, which is a low light camera, actually was sensitive enough to pick up some bioluminescence. So there was some really cool bioluminescence as well that I wasn't expecting. And not really related to the animals, but as a little bit of a side bit, anyone interested in the sort of technology and the logistics of science, I very soon realized that generates a lot of data. Like a 360 camera is essentially 2 cameras. I had 2 systems on it, so 3 cameras in total, deployed for 7 hours. That was 21 hours of footage to review every night. And so with the help of Microsoft Copilot, I wrote a little bit of software that would scrub through the video and look for light events within that. That's the data bottleneck really that we get a lot with science, even though it's an incredible opportunity to get these ROVs down there and things like that. Actually, it's processing that data that is the bottleneck and having enough expert eyes on it to know what's going on. And actually it was really interesting being on the SOI cruise, seeing that from the other side, the live streaming and the incredibly active citizen science community that's built up around that, and actually how effective it is for science. Like, it's wonderful to share that, it's wonderful to have those people along, but actually those people enable a huge amount of science because they scrub through the video, they pull out the important parts and know the experts to then send a tweet or message on Blue Sky, and actually they are that piece of software for the scientific community. Like, we don't have the time to scrub through all the video, but they're filtering things out and getting them to the expert. Yeah, as a little tangent, just a massive thank you to that community. And it was wonderful being on the dive streams and on the other side of it and seeing the chat and talking to people in the chat, and just really appreciate that because I know there's a big overlap between podcast listeners.
It's also worth noting that, the pelagic gets a lot less attention from ROVs and filming things because it's so big and the incidence of actually observing stuff is so much lower, right? You can't get to the seafloor and be like, okay, we're on the seafloor, we're going to see stuff, we know where the seafloor is and this is where we're stopping, right? So in the pelagic, you can have hours and hours of footage. But on the flip side, if you have something that can scrub the footage and say, you only need to look at this bit because there's only something in frame, that doesn't work so well for the deep sea, right? Where there are lots of progress being made on annotating seafloor images and automating some of the easier IDs, but something that, like what you've written, to just say, okay, it's all black except for this moment, just look at this moment, works really well in the pelagic zone. And I feel like maybe is going to make it more possible to make more observations in that zone without such a backlog of having to process all of that black data.
So yeah, version 2 we were already considering will have a little bit of a security switch kind of thing to it where it might start recording or recording in higher resolution.
Like a trail cam or a wildlife cam.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. Once you're on the seabed with a moving ROV or something, that scene is constantly changing. So you need AI and you need machine learning to pick through that. But because we were looking out into an infinite black void, something comes into the light. So I just need to look at the albedo of the image, really, the amount of light that's bouncing back.
Yeah, and do you want to mention about the wavelengths as well?
That was good fun. I at first just looked at how much illumination was being bounced back at the camera, and that sometimes was triggered by sort of particles and things going past. But then, because I didn't quite trust it yet, I was watching all the videos anyway, and I noticed that some flashes of bioluminescence were really interesting but really small. They didn't really flip the detector more than the marine snow. So then I separated out the channels, so I had the red, blue, green that made up the camera's channels, and if I saw a spike in the red, it meant that something had come in front of the camera and had bounced our own light back at us. But if I saw a peak in the blue and the green, it meant something was making its own light in that classic sort of bluey-green bioluminescence. And that ended up working really well. So rather than watching 7 hours of video, I'd have a graph with a few peaks when something big came in front of the camera and bounced our light back, and then a few peaks when something had bumped into the camera, been startled, and pooped some bioluminescence.
Genius.
It really saved me a lot of time. I think I would have gone crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now on from here, I'm out here. We've already got the gear. We've got a little bit of funding. So we jumped on the opportunity to, again, calling in a lot of favors. People have been really good to us.
Joining a voyage with Intrepid Travel, a company based out of Australia. I had been speaking to them about having a team of scientists come out and do some work on one of their tourist vessels this season. And so on the ferry on our way back from the Kaikoura testing, when you were still rehydrating and probably not in your right mind yet.
Agreed to more things.
Agreed to more things. So we looked at the voyage schedule and realized that they had one going not too long after when you were going to be out with Schmidt. And so had a quick look at whether we could pull together keeping you and the gear out here and I could come out as well because they wanted a team of 2 scientists to go together. So next minute, day after tomorrow, we're going to Antarctica again. So we're taking our camera system out alongside tourist activities, and we're going to be doing some science communication on board and talking to excited people about Antarctic ecosystems and who lives there and what we're trying to achieve.
We're paying our way with lectures.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and alongside that, we're gonna put our little system in some different locations, including the location where the colossal squid was first described from. Right?
Nice.
So we're gonna be around the South Shetland Islands, which is the type locality where those initial arm crowns were found in a sperm whale stomach. So
Nice. Well, 100-year story comes back to the beginning.
it feels like fate.
Don't jinx it. Don't
No.
jinx it. If we never mentioned it again, you'll know. You'll know that this didn't work. But it's a cool system. We're proud of what we've done.
And we had a good time along the way most days.
Yeah, maybe looking back. We do have an interesting opportunity with Intrepid Travel in that they've allowed us to hold an auction to help fund our horribly over budget science. And that explains suitcase number 6. This was sprung on me.
I feel like some of this was signaled early, but you selectively tuned it out. Yep.
Well, maybe I just didn't quite believe it come to pass. So what's in suitcase number 6?
Well, Tom, if you open suitcase number 6,
And good luck closing it again.
and good luck closing it again. I mean, why would you go to Antarctica without bringing your own full-size colossal squid just in case?
Well, probably if you're trying to travel light.
She doesn't weigh much. So yes, we have a suitcase that contains a life-size stuffed animal colossal squid made by resident squid crafter Heather Braid of the AUT Squid Squad. She who made our life-size giant squid as well. And some lucky and currently unsuspecting person on this voyage may go home with their own full-size colossal squid.
Someone is probably in a hotel in Ushuia right now and has no idea what's coming.
No idea.
Who they're going to be taking home with them.
If you allow this suitcase to burst open, about 6 meters of plush colossal squid will come springing out like a coiled snake out of a peanut brittle can and give you a lovely warm hug and be your best friend forever.
She's going to be our mascot on the boat. She'll get around. She'll get around. So we'll post some pictures in the show notes if you want to see. It really is as big as it sounds. Heather's done an amazing job. It's huge.
Yeah. To conserve on space, the mantle is not fully stuffed, but the fins are properly sized. The arms and tentacles are all stuffed. The head and eyes are stuffed. And we've got 2 bags of balloons with us to plump up the mantle so that she looks like she's supposed to.
And that brings us up to speed. We've not missed anything, any cool facts about the Colossal. I feel we covered it fairly well.
Oh, I don't think I even talked about its scientific name. I should have mentioned it. So we were talking about giant squid and colossal squid, right? Giant squid, Architeuthis ducks. The scientific name for colossal squid, which is the species name is hamiltoni after the person who discovered the arm crowns, but the genus name is Mesonychoteuthis. And meso means middle, onycho is hooks, and teuthis is squid, so that genus name is given for that distinctive feature of the hooks in the middle of the arms, which was how they recognized it was different. And I should mention as well, in passing, I talked about the swiveling hooks, but that seems to be one of the features that people are the most fascinated by. So the squid has hooks on the arms that don't move, they're sort of deeply seated in the musculature, but on the tentacles, on the ends of the 2 long tentacles, they do have these amazing swiveling hooks that can rotate a full 360 degrees in either direction. And that is fairly unique among squids as well. And it's unknown whether they are actively turning those and using them to manipulate things, or whether they're just sort of passively able to allow them to turn so that if they're holding on to struggling prey, for example, they don't lose the hooks. But those are one of the strongest other pieces of evidence we have for how important these squids are in the diets of sperm whales, because male sperm whales that have been down in Antarctica foraging often have these massive series of parallel scratches on their heads.
Do we know much about their diet? The problem with squid and all cephalopods really is they chew their food.
They do. They have a pretty good set of chopping equipment in the middle of the arm, so they've got a pair of beaks and a radula that then further rasps down food into very fine pieces. It's quite important because the esophagus goes directly through the middle of the donut-shaped brain, so chewing your food properly is quite important to them. But it does mean that if you're trying to figure out the diet, you are left with a shredded mess in the stomach contents. So if you want to directly observe those, depending what they've been eating, you can sometimes identify fish otoliths. You can do genetic studies, you can do DNA barcoding and have pretty good results, but very few colossal squid stomachs have ever had anything in them that could be identified. So we know that they'll attack hooked toothfish.
But that might be quite a recent thing because
Might
they're
be quite a
caught
recent
on a
thing.
line.
Yeah, exactly. So not very much is actually known about their own diet. Stable isotopes have indicated that they are probably eating fish and squid. Their nitrogen signatures put them pretty high up the food chain, but again, they could also be scavenging. So
Yeah, those things might be dead.
yeah, could be a mix of things.
There's something interesting going on with the sexes as well. We haven't seen the boys.
Well, we haven't seen that many girls either.
True.
So,
We haven't seen many at all.
We haven't seen many at all.
But there seems to be a bias.
The 4 specimens that have been examined on site at Te Papa have all been female. The male reproductive structures are not reported in the literature. I think I've seen a male arm crown in the British Museum, but again, it was like a head and some arms, and one of the arms was a bit different at the tip, which could be enough to indicate that, but could also be damaged and regrown. The males are not described yet, and certainly no specimen has been examined that was conclusively a large or anywhere near mature male. We have a handful of small specimens, sort of 30 centimeters or smaller, and some of those might be male, but we don't really know anything about the big ones.
So we don't know a great deal about their reproduction, although we do have some records of the babies,
Yes.
which was a surprise. I didn't know that.
Yep. Some little tiny paralarvae have been encountered. In fact, some hatchlings, fairly large for squid hatchlings, have been encountered. So 5 or 6 millimeters mantle length, but still with a membrane enclosing the arms and the head. And then they look very similar to another glass squid that's found down in the Antarctic, including at the small sizes. So there's been some work done on distinguishing those two, but still very rare in collections at any life stage.
With something so iconic, there is lots of clickbait and nonsense and crack and stuff out there. If only there was a trusted, reliable online database of cephalopod information where you just know it's true, it's been properly curated.
If only.
If only. Someone should do... Kat, someone should do that. Kat.
No more projects.
Kat.
No more.
Someone should do that. It would be really useful.
Yes, such a thing has been dreamed of and is underway. Those who have been researching or trying to find information about cephalopods for a long time may be familiar with a platform called the Tree of Life website, which has amazing cephalopod information that unfortunately is not really able to be maintained anymore. And so looking for a new home for that treasure trove of information, plus all the species that never made it on there, we have started an initiative to build an online compendium of cephalopod information and aiming to have biological information, ID tips, live images, live videos for as many species as possible, including the colossal squid. So brand new, shiny information pages for colossal and giant and all your other favorite cephalopods, hopefully coming up within the scope of the year. And we are still doing a little bit of fundraising for that initiative, but it is moving along. And someday soon, hopefully, we'll be able to point to, not just what we know about identifying the physical specimens when they're in jars or on the lab table, but have genetic information and all of the beautiful live recent observations and footage that people have been gathering as well.
Very cool. So there'll be a link to both the prototype of the website so you can get a feel for it, and also how you can donate and support. And you may even be able to adopt one of the pages.
Yes, if you've got a favorite cephalopod, you can adopt them and sponsor their page.
There we go. So all the info will be in the show notes. Thank you very much for having a chat. This feels like a culmination of, it's been about a year and a half of work.
I'm impressed that you're still saying thank you and not stop asking me to do things.
What is it now?
What? I don't want to open that email today.
So yeah, thank you very much. It feels weird saying goodbye because I can't hang up because you're in the room. But we need to go to a hardware store and buy 500 meters of line.
We do, but it will be excellent line, and it will do a very good job of not losing our system in the Antarctic icy waters while we look for an animal no one has ever seen.
Gonna navigate a language barrier with our friend in the hardware store who thinks we're crazy.
He's not wrong.
Because of the things we were gathering
Why? Why would he think that?
I want 500 meters line and I want a water pump, but it needs to do this. Look at this wheel.
Look at this wheel.
We need a hose reel.
While we look like we look and are being followed by stray dogs around town.
That's true. Yeah, we both kind of have undercuts / mohawks / dyed hair right now.
We've decided that as we walk around town, one of us should always be wearing a hat so that they can't reliably identify us as the pair of people who look like that walking around town.
There'll be stories told about us. Right, let's go buy some twine. And that concludes this episode of the Deep Sea Podcast. We don't have a coffee with Andrew this month because he is... Well, he might be in a sub right now as I'm speaking. So he is off in the Pusica Trench, the one south of New Zealand, a completely unexplored trench between New Zealand and Antarctica. So faunally very interesting. I'm already hearing some exciting things from him that I'm not allowed to talk about just yet, but we will definitely get him back on the show as soon as he's back, so wishing him well there. Final thank you to all those who support the show and help to keep it going. If you would like to advertise with the Deep Sea Podcast, then feel free to get in touch on the podcast email. Our audience is a pretty good mix, actually. Generally science-positive people who like to learn new things, a lot of undergrads who are studying marine biology or marine technology, and some older folks who are just excited to learn something new. If you'd like to reach these audiences, get in touch. And so I'll deep see you next time, and I abyss you already.
But my eyes are drawn to some of these sentences further down. They're talking about something very scientific, and it says this was achieved by means of white rabbit switches with a readapted form factor fitting the KM3 in underwater vessels. We refer to them as wet white rabbit switches in relation to their dry counterparts in shore stations. Wet and dry white rabbit switch fabrics allow also the distribution of the timing to the optical modules with the required nanosecond accuracy. According to the standard white rabbit...
You did say that they talk about weird things.
And it is according to the standard white rabbit protocol developed at CERN. Like, what are you talking about?
Oh, the standard white rabbit protocol, but these are just wet ones.
Well, the dry ones are wet white rabbits, apparently. These guys used to always argue about Monte Carlos as well. I never figured out what that was. They'd quite often talk about each other's Monte Carlo or something, and you're like, oh, okay.
Oh, it is literally a rabbit hole. We're following white rabbits. Wet ones.
And dry ones.
And dry ones. But these aren't the dry ones. They're like the dry ones, but they're wet because they're in the water. Yeah. I like how they have to explain that bit, but not what white rabbit is.
Yeah.